All right, love and peace to everyone. Love and peace. Thank you for being here this day on RB Bay Publications and Presentations. I am that I am, Bryce Mariah Bay, and we want to get started on just a few things that we must say, and that is that we come to you in love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. For anyone new, um, that when we advise, when one says, "What do I read next? What do I read to get started?" Start wherever your soul dictates, but we suggest these things as a listing. And we also, you can screenshot this for the itinerary that we have on this platform in the same direction. Screenshot that. All right. And Circle 7 Sunday, first Sunday of the month. And this is Sister Standing on Law, third Sunday coming up, y'all. And this is the Enlightened Asiatic. That's coming up as well on the third Monday. And that brings us to class PowerPoint that I had years ago. One of the reasons it's important is because I find that many do not, in order for us to know what's going down, we need to know who is who and what is what. So many really in their mind don't realize that they're looking at this American land, this North American continent, this national domicile. For those who are Aboriginal and Indigenous beings, they're not 14th Amendment, meaning they don't have jack to do with the state. So we're looking at not, I don't say jack to do with it. Let's find out how it rolls down through the course. So they forget that, and like they'll say, well, we're going to go start a new government. We're going to go start a new state. Like the big thing is states. Like people have all this pride in, like, yeah, this is our state. The names of states that are what was placed on them by UNS.A, because I'm going to tell you who they are. And that way you'll know who they are not, which is the important thing, to know who they are and absolutely to know who they are not. It doesn't matter what muscles they're flexing right now. The only reason they're flexing as much as that is one behind murder, outright theft, and the fact that we've allowed it for whatever reason doesn't matter. Does not matter that we didn't know because we learned it in school and our parents put us into the school. We have to go back to the mindset of our ancient foremothers and fathers who set all this, really set all this up. So what we find happening today, and some of you are aware of this, is that these people are starting states and they don't even realize that states were established from colonies. Colonies emerged into states after they got their freedom. So why would you, as either a Moor, first navigator on this planet, we even showed in that class that, we are the first navigator. Moor means to moor the waters. That's what it means. And so we are the first to do that, to moor those seven seas on this earth. But the first waters that we navigated was in our mother's womb. That's the honor back to your mother. And then she crowned you when you came out. But you became a navigating yell on the earth plane. If we can't take our minds back to that, it's just treading water. That is nothing to what needs to be known and done. That the universe is expecting from us all. That karmic debt is expecting from us all. That what is happening now, the Pope has already said um, that they don't have any claim. They gave up the ghost because they had to. All of these things. So we're treading. So I find that to be true, and then we find this like, oh, yeah, we hear. Well, the whole government, even when you go back as far as the treaty, which you're going to see today. I mean, not today, because I think that's part two. This is very well organized in terms of the part one, part two, etc. We're going to do one and two today, though. But three is where we start talking about the treaty, the Constitution. And we need to understand where we were or at that time and still are to this day, regardless to what has happened or what we've been taught or told. So the importance of knowing that just this far, because when you go back into how these treaties and agreements were made, now you got to go back anciently. But the first thing is enslavement of modern Europeans in America by who? By the British Moors. See, this is where we get confused at too, because the British Moors are our cousins. They had a treaty called the Treaty of between Morocco and Great Britain, which is now called England. We're all family. And so they brought their companies over and their employees over. And the first persons that sat in those plantations were not you, they were modern Europeans. So as you go through this course, and we show and prove with documented evidence, you have to change your mind about that. But what you will realize is that they didn't, even though we say, oh well, it's because we're educated by, we didn't have our own schools, it's whatever. Well, guess what? With the schools that they did provide, they still didn't tell you about their truth. Now they stated some things like they had to get their what? Independence from who? From themselves? No, from British laws. That's why they got their freedom from Britain. That is, or what they, well, see, like anything else, they'll come in and change the name. We all know this is Almarak. We all know that the North American continent is Morocco. We all know that the first navigators are Moors. But so what they do is, so they'll say England. Say they call Britain England now. So the things that they were going through on their independence, they were still subjects of England. The British Moors, the British crown, the queen, the crown there. And all the things, a lot of the things they did was based on them being subjects to that. Now imagine that during that time, after they had come here and they got left on the shore and left to die, and the Aboriginal indigenous people helped them. And those Aboriginal indigenous people were not Indians all day long. It's very interesting. They weren't even called Indians. Indian is the very first brand that was put on us. Not Negro, colored, black, or Ethiopian. It doesn't mean that we weren't those people that they refer to as Indians. We most certainly were, because we're the first here. So now imagine that you're here on the land, right? You're doing all this native, natural stuff. And these people are dealing with foes and fighting England for their freedom. Britain, excuse me, which then became called England. That's what they're doing. Let me tell you how I know for a fact that many of us weren't even paying attention to their struggle. The only reason why we know all about this is because with truth and falsehood, they put it in the history books and the public school system. I know people. My family is from the South also. A lot of us are going down South now and finding out that like we've abandoned our stuff. But there's people, you've got to watch this movie by Queen Latifah. It's just another. She's a beekeeper, a beekeeper. Yeah, she sells honey, and in it, they drop jewels to us all the time. But she was free. Never knew nothing about not being free. I know people in my family, and you may know some in yours. And if you get a chance to talk to some of the people, especially down south, because a lot of people ran away from the south and came up north. But if you get to talk to them, they'll tell you they never saw these signs that said on a bathroom saying for whites only. They never saw that stuff. They was living off the land. They didn't even know they was going through that stuff. It did not apply to all of us. But the media and the hype that they give you and teach you, they want you to believe that. And even in schools today, they want to start talking about Benjamin Banneker and Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth and this one and that one and so on, so they could give you a perspective of who they were. Those are our people. We should be giving the perspective of who they were. That is the reason why we have to have our own institutions of learning called schools. And a lot of things that we are setting up here, are going to be a part of that curriculum someday, one day, 2 day. Right now it's 2 day to you who are here. All right. So they didn't know about this slavery. They would, and then you go to the other movie, 12 Years a Slave. They dropped jewels. The brother was from the north. He was from the north. Didn't mean that we weren't inhabiting the north and eastern, western, southern, the whole daggone thing. It didn't mean we weren't there. But he was never a slave. You know how many of our people were never a slave? We were never slaves. The true slaves are called Slavics. They're the modern European that you call white people, that we have been calling white people. That's a fact. But I'm saying some of them never experienced, some of our people never experienced getting hung on a tree. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm not saying, but so thereby we were enslaved and treated as such. And then that rolled into, more and more paperwork and in terms of them writing up their stuff. I'm going to show you in this course what they really wrote up in the beginning that proves to you that they were slaves, that proves to you that they were asking for their independence, that proves to you what they went through to get it. You feel sorry for them? No, 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 not at all, because I understand that every nation has suffered slavery. I'm saying it so we can get out of our heads that these people are boss, that these people govern us in any way. That's why I'm saying it, because you can stand in and walk in truth and be what you know, because you can't be who you are unless you be what you know. And lastly, when we act as though we're going to start a new state and a new this and a new that, we are literally abandoning our ancestral state. We're literally abandoning it because we're going to start something new. And what you going to do with this? Give it to them? But as I stated before, states were colonies, which were the Slavics and the modern Europeans, as they rised up and they emerged as states. It hurts my heart to see our people thinking they need, and they use Judy Posaditas to do it, which is exactly what the modern European slaves had to do. It's hurtful. It really is. But they'll get there because we're all going to get there at some point. So modern European Slavics, this is what I had on your advertisement, were brought over to North America. You know what? I don't even need to read this because it's the first premise of the thing. But what I will need to say is this begins a series of classes with a review of events inclusive of Articles of Association, Treaty of Paris, 1783, because that's what actually freed the modern Europeans. It wasn't 1776, but they'll say it was, but they had a war for 7 years because our British brethren didn't want to free them. They'd rather fight than to free them. So it really took them 7 years to get that freedom. But while they were waiting, they were over here on our land, and they were starving because the British was like, screw you. We brought you over here to be slaves. We brought you over here to work in these plantations. We brought you over here to work in our companies. No way. So they suffered. They were suffering. All right. Got proof positive of that right out of their own mouth, written down and in the records. Not just the documents of American history, as they would say, and congressional records, as they would say, but a lot of the things that happened were not necessarily in the congressional records by origin, because the congressional records didn't exist, because the U.S.A didn't exist yet. But there's history and documentation of the things that they went through, and those are the things they don't show you. They don't show you that because it's just like the Benjamin Banneker letter. If you really read it and you knew who you were, it would prove that itself proves that they were slaves and that he was free. That itself. So they're not going to put that into your the children's curriculum and any of their institutions. You're not going to find it. We have to be the ones that tell it. But it exists. It's obtainable. As was mentioned, the Library of Congress really is where they put a lot of our stuff from the Library of Alexander, and some of it, is in the Vatican. So this is so timely, because we have to remember that we taught them. We brought them out of slavery. I mean, we brought them out of dark ages, out of the darkness. We did. And we taught them everything. And even there was a mention about the aristocracy. I did mention that because that needed to be understood as to why they might die in England and be over here, or be over here, or be born in England and die over here, or whatever like that. The aristocracy, or that era, was a part of the era of teaching them. Think about it. We were teaching them those things. Who was teaching them those things? Oh, you mean not the aristocracy, but the royals. So see, we got to go back even further. When we get to the Treaty of Peace, it talks about that, and consular courts that was never established for us either. It got proof of that. When we get there and they say, well, some things were left to the home government. Who do you think the home government was? Us. But we don't look at it that way. In our mind, we're enslaved to believe. Obviously, we think this is their stuff. We don't know that we taught them. But again, it's understandable because they hid a lot of stuff. So this begins a series of classes with a chronological review of events inclusive of Articles of Association, Treaty of Paris, 1783, Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1787, Sundry Free Moors Act, Organic Constitution. And you see, y'all know why I said Organic Constitution. There's so many of us running around thinking the state's constitution is the supreme law of the land, because they never read the supreme law of the land that we gave to them to keep them in check, to find out that we said, yeah, y'all can have your constitution, but you can't violate the mother constitution. You can't violate the supreme constitution that we established for y'all to follow. Have they been violating it? Absolutely. Why? Because of our lack of knowledge about it. It wasn't for us, but we are to enforce it. That's the royal and nobility that we have with ourselves, is to enforce that. And then, of course, the Benjamin Banneker letter to Jefferson and other documents of history. I do want to say this. I don't know if Ms. is on the line. Part of this series right now is going to include Ms. Ryan giving a presentment regarding Sojourner Truth. Let me just tell you why real quick. I said earlier, all of us were not slaves. Sojourner Truth dealt with the law in, I believe, where's the notes? 1928. Oh, no, not 1928. I'm sorry, 1828. I don't want to misquote the dates. I wrote them down. But she was doing that because she never was a slave. And then you talk about the Emancipation Proclamation. Who were they emancipating? And then when you think about it, they were the slaves. They were emancipating themselves. But then let's go back a little further, because they had slavery as servitude as well. And so if you go look at that movie, which one was it? I don't know if it was Django or 12 Years a Slave. You'll see the modern European sitting telling you that he's still in servitude. Mm-hmm. But yet the brother was never a slave. So many that, like, while they're going through their growth and coming up, that we're going to show, trying to be free from the British Moors, we was living our life. We were doctors, lawyers, scholars. We were all that. So they fed us a narrative that we took up. That's just like even today, trying to tell people, yo, that's not your own people. That's not what it is. They may not want to listen. So it's a matter of them picking up that construct, and that's another reason why they don't tell you about the doctors and the women. Women. Talk about women. The women were doctors, lawyers, all of that stuff, but they fed a narrative that got fed and bled into the generations over and over again. Now, when I hear Charlie said you have to have your own schools, and he instructed that to the temples, whether they have them or not, whatever, I understand more as I study more why he said that. It's imperative, because as I just said, we were doing our thing, but yet we all think we were slaves. So we get this chronology together, and we'll understand that, just like with the Sundry Free Moors. Oh, they brought these Negroes, true Negroes, which are the modern European Slavics. They said, hold on, wait a minute, I want you to be clear. We ain't a part of that. We're not a part of that. So these are some books. Hold on to the struggle, that's right, and hold on to the constructs. They want to hold on to the struggle, but yet they want to be free. Wait a minute. Starts in the mind. So these are a few books, and a few of these we read on the MHH Eyes Wide Open blog talk series. I know we read They Were White and They Were Slaves. And then the other one is called Christian Slaves, Muslim Masters, Cruelty. You talking about the Barbary Coast, right? An eyewitness account of white slavery under the Moors.
I'm sorry, I don't mean, but look, when you call me out, I've been trying to get in on my other computer that has the mic on. I guess I'm experiencing the Mercury retrograde energy as well. Nobody's exempt. You know what I'm saying? It's really weird over here right now on the computer. Then, so I tapped in on my other computer, but the speaker and mic on that doesn't work. So I'm calling in off the phone. But I did want to say, yes, I'm here. I appreciate you all, and definitely look forward to adding on in this historical series. But I tapped in at this time because it sounded like you went out. I apologize for the timing. I wasn't prepared to give a full class on that tonight, but I will just mention some points that you and I spoke about. And we spoke about this before. And again, shout out to all three of you, Ma, Jay, Karima, the other sister, Red, for having that panel, because that energy is important. You know what I'm saying? And it's that time, and it's evident all around us that, we have to really pay attention to the history to really understand the now, and or take those lessons and those references that our people, first and foremost, but definitely the women, had already demonstrated in the 1800s. So one of the highlights I was thinking about with Sojourner Truth is the fact that, she found her way to freedom in 1826, and then won a court case in 1828 to get her son back in court, right? And it was interesting because they say that we, quote unquote, didn't get free till 1865. And it made me think, well, how did this so-called, we know, well, I'll say it for what it is, this Moorish woman found her way to freedom 1826, then sued in court against a so-called slave owner, basically, essentially a freedom suit, right? 5 principles, a freedom suit, and won in 1828. And again, I can't emphasize how that is a telltale sign that, all of us were not slaves. All of us were not in that status. And if they tried it, their method of fighting back at that time was through the law. So it brought me back to the point that Noble Jali was saying, since that constitution that was enforced since 1774 has never been changed, there is no need for the application of the 14th and 15th Amendment. So we were recognized as free way prior to the Emancipation Proclamation and the Civil War and all of these things. It was free Moors that were fighting on the Union side as well. So the concept of we didn't get free till 1865 is kind of bogus when you really look at the true history. And we all know this. I'm sure there's many more on the line now that know this, but let us not forget that and overlook that as we're talking about these principles. And I mean, to me, from what I'm gathering from her story, is, she did everything Moors are doing today back then in the 1820s, right? And down to the name correction, right? So I just see so many similarities that these legends, these free people, free Moors, so-called free blacks and all, like, what they did and what we trying to do today, it's like if they could do it in the 1820s, I know we could do it now. I know for a fact it could be done. You know what I mean? Winning freedom suits and all of these things. Granted, you might not have a situation where you're dealing with that, but if you do, the ancestors already did everything that we're trying to do today. And all I'm saying is let us not forget that. They were free. Some were enslaved, but we were not all slaves with no rights and deprived, because again, since that Constitution of 1774 declared all men equal and free, it has never changed. That 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment, again, this is Noble Jali, but it checks out, it's valid. And so from that timeline of 1774 to the 1820s, you could kind of see the principles they were standing on before the the Emancipation Proclamation. So yeah, I those were my thoughts at the moment about Sojourner Truth, you know. And even if we were to look at her aspect of the name correction, right? She was quote unquote born with the given name Isabella Baumfree, but it was still freedom in her appellation. Then corrected it to the end of her appellation being truth. So we'll get to that later. But as far as what you were asking me about now, that's what's on my mind, or was on my mind, as far as what we spoke about earlier. And I trust people could do the research if they haven't already. I mean, I know we come up hearing about it, but we don't really look at their stories. Some of us don't. But to really look at it and see it and see the similarities in the principles from then to now, like certain things just don't change. Principles don't. And so yeah, that's what I have for you on that for now. All right. So love and peace.
We look forward to that on this series right here. We do. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. No problem. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's excellent. One other thing, the in what we call corporate Delaware today, from that book, Emma Marie Trusty, where they actually, even under the Delaware name, in the Delaware, the Lenape, right? That's the tribal and family appellations. They were acknowledged as being Moors, and it's really interesting how, and maybe people don't know that, but they need to know that because we got to be who we are. First navigators on this earth plane. That's what Moors means. The first to moor from your mother's waters and your mother's womb. All right. So here, let's continue on. Let's do a premise here. Premise, and all of this includes the proof. The modern European Slavics, those people you call white people, we have all been calling white people, and they call us black people, were British subjects brought to North America to work in British companies slash plantations, known as English colonies. This is why you will find them calling the Eastern, what they call the Vermont, Connecticut, Massachusetts, they coined them as the New England state. And that's not formal. That's not like because they all have certain states, but they refer to it as the New England states, and everybody kind of knows that. But yet, when we say this is far west, everybody wants to fight about it. Like, oh, they can say New England states, but we can't say Morocco. And on top of that, Morocco is before them. That's how sick we are or how lacking, excuse me, we are in our mental understanding or our mental slavery. That is where the prophet said, look, you're in a mental slavery. Study. So you will find what we find. You will find the truth. So they were brought to North America to work in these British companies. What we know as plantations, they were the first to that's where they were. When we say that, well, we were in the plantations, please know, and I think we all do by now, that they've reversed everything. The truth has been reversed. They were not able to leave, to egress, as we say, move. Their travels were hindered, which is the most basic freedom, is to move to and fro and any conveyance you wish to. They had to pay a fee to the British, who was their masters, in order to move from one plantation to the next. They were accounted for and accounted for. They were forced into the box, so to speak, and all they've done is try to turn it around and force you and your children into the box. So the treaty between Great Britain and Morocco, not in the congressional records, as they are records of the Continental Congress. The Congress of the United States did not even exist yet. All right. And I do have that treaty. I'm trying to find it. I have it in one of my many I have everything else, but I'm trying to find that one. If someone could find it, it would be great because I did have it in my hand. So I got to continue to look for it so that you can see. The problem is when you see that between Morocco and Great Britain, you don't understand. That's the disagreement we have with our brothers, cousins, to go ahead and bring over their companies. It's the same as when you see Treaty of Paris. People do not relate to the Treaty of Paris. So when you, even if you were perusing through studies, you would relate to it. But Paris was where the British Moors met. Now you can ask yourself, well, what Paris? The one over there or the one over here on the exotic map? Doesn't matter. We got that straight. Doesn't matter. If you see the Treaty of Paris of 1783, which is really the one that actually freed them after 7 years of fighting, they don't tell you that though. They don't mention that too much. They do talk about the fights, the wars, but they don't teach it. And they damn sure ain't gonna teach it the way we're gonna get it right here. Because they don't want you to know. Because any reasoning mind can figure out, if they had all of that information, the truth. And so their whole thing was to hide you from that truth. So, continuing with the premise. Agreements, because we're talking about 1700s. Well, guess what? Charters and grants. Charters and grants go back as far as 1100s. King John, and you think King John is a European, and it's not. They're Moors, and the 1500s. Queen Elizabeth, she just put that in there. Queen Elizabeth via Sir Walter Raleigh, and the 1600s, King Henry IV. We don't even know that we talk about ourselves. So we infiltrated ourselves. We fought with ourselves. All right. So the agreement between Great Britain and Morocco allowed the Great Britain to set up companies, colonies, plantations on the North American continent, wherein they brought the Slavics to work. Now, let me just make a note about this. I really want to make it clear. The modern European gave us the title of king and queen. Why? Let's take it back to before they came over here. If you tell me you're a king, then you're telling me that you're over modern European Slavics. Thank you, Matthew Fulton. You got to know this. Same with the queen. Those are not Moabites titles. Those are titles that are assigned to them, though. Let's really clear this up. Because the modern Europeans, on the website, RB Bay Publications, there is an article that Ms. Raheem had written, and he showed how right here on the North American continent, with the Aboriginals that want to call themselves Indians today, but they're not. What happened was the modern Europeans gave, I think it's Metacomet and his son, Metacomet and Matis, am I saying the word? Metacomet and Metasut. I don't know if I'm saying that right, man.
So,
What
yeah,
is it?
and a few others. Yes.
And a few
Yeah.
others.
Mhm.
They started calling you Queen and King.
Yeah. They call him King Philip. They call him King Philip, which is what the King Philip's War was about. If you go back and do the history of New England and whatnot, and the USA and all that, King Philip War was that war. But what happened was this was an indigenous sachem, and so his original appellation was Metacomet. He had many appellations, just like every other
Yes.
indigenous chief ever in North America has many appellations, right? So you can look at the song of Hiawatha. Hiawatha had different appellations amongst different tribes and whatnot, right? However, they called Metacomet King Philip or King Alexander, and King Alexander, his brother, they called King Alexander. But this is the thing. They were just sachems. But to the European, they were kings. But now the question is this: that title king, right, could be used loosely because At the end of the day, a king is still a servant in real life. Like whatever structure, and this is back to the universal principle that is in the Declaration of Independence, even though it's for them. But when it was speaking about governments being instituted to protect the rights of the people, right? It didn't just say this government, like it was universal law that was being spoken of. So in that sense, a king is a servant. A king isn't meant to be served like that. Not that they should be disrespected. I'm saying for the title for what it actually is, no different than the president, right? Like they all have an interest, but they're supposed to promote the better good, right? So if a king isn't serving the people, are they really that or
Right.
queen or
So
whatever
that's
title? Yeah. So it's that, yeah, part. But yeah,
no. Thank you very much for that. Absolutely. Thank you. So that's what we're trying to say. So it is not. It is not that uh, Moors weren't called kings or called queens, but by their subjects. So it was a title held for a specific reason. And with that, as we go through this, they these when the ships were leaving from England or Britain, excuse me, bringing the modern European Slavics over here, they also devised that system of title that you find in your job. You get the title of the supervisor. They blew smoke up these modern Europeans and gave them the title of the headmaster of the ship travel. Same thing they do today with you on a job. Same exact thing. So this is where this actually comes from. And so this is why I just wanted to make a note on that. All right. So continuing with the premise. Now, once Great Britain saw the companies, they were profitable. They would take the companies away and put them under the royal crown and suppress them. They would tax them. What they would do is they started taxing them. They were taking them away from them, just like they do today. You don't pay your taxes. The very, very first tax was the British Moors taxing these Slavics. That's what the Stamp Act is or was. That's what the throwing the imports over the Boston Tea Party was about. See, they'll tell you we had the Boston Tea Party because we didn't want to import anything from Great Britain anymore. Sometimes they'll say Great Britain in their writings, and sometimes they'll say England. But please know that England claimed later as a bastardization because they like to bag, tag, name, and claim everything. So you have to know, we have to know that when you say Great Britain or when you say England, you're talking about Great Britain as it were originally. All right. So they bought that England, which means land of the Angles, really England. England is land of Angles. They bought that word and then said, "Oh, these are the New England colonies." And please recall that because that's how they came up. They changed their name, as a matter of fact, from the New England colonies. I'm going to save that to show it to you, but they did while they were waiting to be freed or to get their independence, because there's a difference between freeing of slavery. We could talk about that too, and of course, emancipation, as we mentioned, and independence. All right, they created a lot of stuff that was irrelevant. So they would take the companies. This is a corporate takeover. What we're reading right here. That's all they did. Basically, what you know as a corporate takeover today. That's what they did. They would tax them, tax the imports and the exports, and do very hostile takeovers, inclusive of making false charges and having trials without jury, and other unjust treatments and brutal acts. And that's where I have see the letter to the people of Great Britain. I got a page here that you can screenshot that'll show you all of the documents we will be going over, new things for this 2024 presentment. Some things we didn't have to change because it is what it is. All right. So the letter to Great Britain, that'll be another one because that It's more about them crying and saying, oh, it actually says y'all brought us over here on these unfamiliar shores. We thought we were family. We thought this, and we're being mistreated, and the natives are hostile to us. And oh, they literally were crying. And they sent another one of those same letters to Nova Scotia. That's Canaan, because it's all that's another point for us to prove that Canada, as you know it today, is also, as you can see on a map, North America. Right? So they wrote another letter to Nova Scotia crying. Now, continuing the premise. Consequently, and eventually, after a series of events, the Slavics or colonists desperately and fearlessly desired their freedom from the mistreatment and the tyranny. So they set forth to become independent companies. And that's where you have the Declaration of Independence. But something else happened first, before 1776. And remember, even when they declared their independence in 1776, please know the truth, that they did not receive it until 7 years later in 1783 under the Treaty of Paris, right? And they received it from the British. We need to think about that. So if they say they received it from Britain, that's like, oh, really? Yes, because they were slaves and subjects of Britain, clearly. But that says we get to study and start to think. So they were, here we go, on this North American continent. Therefore, they had to go to the existing Continental Congress for assistance. Now, the Continental Congress was located at Philadelphia. And you have to kind of know that the United Congress wasn't existing at this time. So I know the date by heart, September the 5th, 1774. They marched down there. And then when we went down south, and maybe we can interject that later. I don't know if we have it. We saw a plaque where some of the people, I believe North Carolina, actually came to the Continental Congress, but I think it's the same march, because remember they was doing a lot of walking, horses or whatever, but they came up to the Continental Congress to look at the year, and they joined together. They band together, and they came and they had to talk to the Continental Congress, of which we told them then, the Continental Congress, we told them to declare their independence and ask for it from who? From Britain. Did we say ask for it from America? Or Almaroc at the time? Or what it was America? No, it doesn't say that. It says from the British. So you'll find this in the Articles of Association, which is a wonderful reading. It's only 1 page long. I think I want to pull it up right now. Let me see what I had next. All right, they were on the North American continent, therefore they had to go to the existing Continental Congress for assistance, Articles of Association. So let me just do this right now, and a general idea, because we want to keep this in our head. Really, really do. On the RV Bay Forgotten Scrolls is where you will find Articles of Confederation is there, Declaration of Independence, Articles of Association. Let us take a quick view of this. Get this in our head, because a lot of us right now may be like, we get this now. Point is that this is when they became associated. That's why it's the Articles of Association. All right. So that's when they actually got formalized, but they came, check this out. We, His Majesty, that means a couple of people, let's see who that is. His Majesty's most loyal subjects, the delegates of the what? Several colonies of who? Of New Hampshire. So New Hampshire is a colony. Massachusetts Bay is a colony. Rhode Island a colony. Connecticut a colony. New York a colony. New Jersey, Pennsylvania. The 3 lower counties of Newcastle. Kent Kent and Sussex on the Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Those are the 13. But let me just say this. They changed their name later. Well, let's just go through it because some of them had actually the plantations. You'll see that through too. They kind of changed their names. The plant, like it would be the plantations of Connecticut, the plantations of Massachusetts. You'll see that as we go on. But after they finally got themselves together in 1774 is when they came down. So what are they saying? They're saying here, these colonies, right? They deputed to represent them in a Continental Congress. Let's say U.S. that Congress didn't exist. Held where? Oh, in the city of Philadelphia. When? On the 5th day of September, 1774. Avowing our allegiance to His Majesty, our affection and regard for our in Great Britain and elsewhere. So they're admitting they got some family over there in Great Britain, right? And elsewhere, affected with the deepest anxiety and most alarming apprehensions at those grievances, distresses with which His Majesty's American subjects are oppressed. So now let's clear this up. Every time we hear America, we do not know how to discern and distinguish. They didn't have nationalities or anything. They were just Slavics. So they refer to themselves today as Americans because it's the United States of America. They forget to put United States of in front of it. So when we see America, we get confused because a lot of us don't even know that the United States of America is not America. And we're just using the modern term America today for this purpose. But even with that, because you were already here, the natives, the aboriginals, and I don't think you're addressed in New Hampshire, Massachusetts Bay, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, the 3 lower counties of Newcastle, Kent and Sussex, and Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. I don't think you're the several colonies. I know you're not. That's what they're calling themselves. So, avowing our allegiance to His Majesty, our affection and regard for our fellow subjects in Great Britain and elsewhere, affected with the deepest anxiety and most alarming apprehensions at the grievances and distresses with which His Majesty's American subjects are oppressed. So they had subjects in America. And having taken under serious deliberation this whole continent, find that the unhappy situation of our affairs is occasioned by a ruinous system of colony administration. Experiencing that today. By the British ministry. Who did it? All right. About the year 1763. All right. Now, 1763 is when the Moors finished the War of the French. So don't get it confused. A lot of people, they go to 1763. We're like, no, these colonies that had changed their name to the United States of America got freed in 1783. So don't get that confused. Evidently calculated for enslaving these colonies within the British Empire. So far, I haven't seen anything about us. I haven't even heard anything about the Aboriginal indigenous people who were here already, where this document has nothing to do with us in that respect. In prosecution of which system, various acts of Parliament, British Parliament, have been passed. For who? Not us. For raising a revenue in America, for depriving the American subject, that's not you, in many instances, of the constitutional trial by jury, exposing their lives to danger by directing a new and illegal trial beyond the seas. So what do we get here? One, we get additional proof that they're in one place and they're being suppressed by someone in another place. Oh yes, the British who brought them over here. overseas for crimes alleged to have been committed in America. So what they're telling them, man, this is unjust. Doesn't it sound familiar? Oh, I think it does. The ones that they brought over here to the American land, North American continent, they were charging them saying that they did crimes, and then they were shipping them back to Britain and punishing them without a trial. Sound familiar? All right. So, and in prosecution of the same system, several late cruel and oppressive acts have been passed respecting the town of Boston and Massachusetts Bay, and also an act for extending the province of Quebec. There you go back to Canaan land. And we got to stop excluding Canaan land as being North America, so as to border on the western fronts of these colonies. So they're saying they extended the province of Quebec on the western fronts of these. They're expanding them and establishing what? An arbitrary government therein, and discouraging the settlement of British subjects in that wide extended country. Thus, by the influence of civil principles and ancient prejudices, to dispose the inhabitants to act with hostility against the free Protestant colonies whenever a wicked ministry shall choose so to direct them. Now, in any document, there is the beginning tells you who's who, who's talking, and what generally it's about, even in a contract. What have we so far? We have identified who they are talking, who's talking. These are the people, and they are colonies. Now, so this is where we are now. Grievances, which threaten destruction to the lives, liberty, and property of His Majesty's subjects in North America. So, His Majesty's subjects are in North America. We are of the opinion that a non-importation, non-consumption, and non-exportation agreement faithfully adhered to will prove the most speedy, effectual, and peaceable measure. And therefore, we do for ourselves and the inhabitants of the several colonies whom we represent firmly agree and associate under the sacred ties of virtue, honor, and love of our country. I'm not going to read the contents. I just wanted to, at this point, I just wanted to stop here to just give you a general idea of what has been said thus far and to identify who is talking, because this is 1774. There's some other stuff that went down first. They've come to the point where these atrocities that were happening to them. So, with that being said, go back to our PowerPoint. I'll wait a second. I'll wait a second for those who are saying it's choppy to come back in. I will hold it right here because this is important. I see you, Lori. All right. And anyone else that thinks that they're choppy right now, just I'll wait for you because we want to get this. This is the premise of everything that we really do need to know. All right. So now let's just take this second, because all of these we're going over. But this is a pre-sage to them getting to 1774, because at that point, by the time they got to 1774, what they had said to themselves was, I have taken all that I can stand, and I stands no more. That's what happened. They said, I've taken all that I can stand, and I can stand no more. I stands no more. So prior to that, modern European colonists, this is a historical chronology, you can snapshot it, 1643. Modern European colonists, Slavic working in British companies on the North American continent, they band together and formed a union amongst themselves. So it's not formal, it's not any real lawful validity in that respect, but it was amongst themselves, called the United Colony of New England. So Articles of Confederation, 1643, and they did another one in 1777. Now, on the website, if you go to MHHS School, Morse Hydrogen History School page, go on there, and they even have a test that you can take with questions and answers. What we find is we do not identify ourselves, or we don't know how to like, whenever we see the word slave, oh, that must be us, and it's not. And that's why this is important to know. That's why I identified these people as the colonists from the beginning here. So when they made those confederate, the 1643, they were banding together like anybody else would huddle and say, "Oh Lord, we got to stick together because we're being mistreated, and these British Moors don't give a dang about us. We got to do something." So they band together in their Articles of Confederation. So, so when you read those Articles of Confederation, it'll read like they band together. Now, maybe we'll do that next week, or read part of it, because I really want us to go through all of it. But because I had it as like, okay, you go and review those things, but we're going to review especially the ones that identify them, so you can see that. And all of these things they did, they remained the colonies of New England until 1777, when they did another Article of Confederation and submitted that to the Continental Congress at Philadelphia. And that one that where they were saying they were styling their name from the United Colonies of New England to, guess what, to the United States of America. That's what it is. That's how it is. United States of America, not United States, just the United States of America. That was in 1777. But now check, in 1777, they were still waiting for their freedom. They went in and said, well, while we're waiting, we want to change our name to, formally, let's say, because they were calling themselves that anyway. We want to change our name to the United States of America. And so that's how that name came up. The non-America. All right. So 1643. And I just read you the Articles of Association where they all band together. But these are things that were happening prior to. So in 1665, British fought the Dutch. Imagine these modern European Slavics are sitting on the dock of the bay, sitting on the sideline watching the Moors, the British Moors, fight, because they were, they were spice trade in a position where that goes. So they were fighting the Dutch colonies. This is how everything was coming up, to try to take over. In the meantime, these Slavics that came over from the British Moors and out of Europe, that the Queen Europa, seated. Remember, she was over them, so that title was befitting for that. But it's not, as we stated earlier. So the British fought the Dutch. That was a 2-year war, and that went on from 1665 to 1667. So now these modern Europeans are watching now. Let's go down. British then fought in 1756. This was a 7-year war, because there's more than one 7-year war. They fought from 1756 to 1763. The French. Watch that go down. And then in 1763, there was a Treaty of Paris that ended the French and the British War. So what did they do? Now watch this. 1763 ended the war, and the British lost a lot of finances. They took some losses. So what did they do? This is where your first tax revolt for them. The Stamp Act of 1765. Now I know I did. I learned about the Stamp Act. It's very, very, very highly important to them, just as the Boston Tea Party is. So in 1765, after the previous mentioned wars, the British decided to tax the English colonies to recoup finances lost in the war. And that began thoughts of revolting. But some 10 years later, almost, is when they actually revolted, began to rise up. And that is called the Boston Tea Party. Now, if you look up the Stand Back, what I just told you, you're going to find it there. You're also going to find it took them some 10 years later to actually do it, which from 1765 to 1773. So the Boston Tea Party comes and they revolted by throwing shipments of tea off the boat. The party is an active political party today. What did that Sarah Palin? They're part of the Tea Party. What is she saying? That was about revolting against Moors, British Moors, as it were. So they try to revive that Tea Party. Now, what is a party? A party is a political jurisdiction named, coined, whatever jurisdiction where people join it. Now, I'm not going to say that Moorish American is have anything to do with this, but the same thing goes for us. Anything we want to do, say, get involved with it. If we did, we're Moorish Americans, and you know what that means. They ought to know what that means. They ought to know the culture, the customs that go with that, and that we live our life accordingly. We ain't part of no Tea Party, no Democrat, no Republic, but we are our nation of people, because we're talking about polities, which means politeness, not what it has come up to. All right. So now the 7-Year War of 1756, on a note down here, to 1763 is the war spoken of in that letter to the people of Great Britain, referencing how they, the English colonists, fought their enemy for them. That's what they're going to say. Because some of them, like anything else, some were on the side, some took sides, right? They thought that the British sovereigns were their friends, because they use that terminology, sovereigns, and they also use ancient. They already use ancient ones in there. And that's not them. That they would favor them, it's like sucking up, like many of them do to this day. Keep in mind that everyone, though, wanted control over the sea. So I already said that. We are the seafarers originally. We are first ones to moor of this planet Earth, coming out of our mama's womb. Now, we stopped off at 73, 1774. I already read it. We had all this stuff happen and much more. Remember, they were starving on these lands. And we, the Aboriginal indigenous people, they sometimes help them, from prevented them from dying. That's humane. That's humanity. So by 1774, so how many, they was going through this for a while. Here we are at 1774, and we got the Articles of Association. Then when they went to the existing, and I keep emphasizing the existing Continental Congress at Philadelphia, not the U.S.A. Congress. It wasn't even established yet. To ask for assistance and gain independence as an independent company, and to end tyrannical treatment perpetrated against them by the British. So in 1775, they wrote a dissatisfaction letter. They was mad at the British. They really were like, if you read it, you can hear in their wordings their cry. You can hear in their wordings how badly they were treated. I'm not saying it makes it right. I'm telling you what it is. And they want to get back at you. Wrote a dissatisfaction letter to the people of Great Britain. Wrote a similar letter, as I mentioned, to the British colonies at Quebec, Nova Scotia, because they had them up there as well in the plantations. So now in 1776, now check this out. In 1774, they came to the Continental Congress, but it took them 2 years. Things move slower anyway, to write the letter. What they decided to do before they wrote the Declaration of Independence was to write this dissatisfaction letter to the British Moors, and send one to the colonies that they had, at Quebec. That's what they did first. Then in 1776, and that letter is good. Y'all gonna find that interesting. We are going to read that. And if we have questions while we're reading that, we need to ask them. You know what I mean? We are going to definitely read it. It's amazing what you will find out about what is the truth about this thing. So in 1776, they drafted and submitted their Declaration of Independence from the British. They requested their freedom, their independence, but it was not yet received. They're going to say, we got our independence in 1776, because technically and formally, they did not get it until 1783. But all right, we'll just let them have the 1776, because they wrote a great document. And in that document, it says all men are created equal. So think about that for a second. If it's already established that all men are created equal, then, that's on the record. All right, well, we got to honor that for humanity. Then why is there any need for the 14th and 15th Amendment? Why any need for the emancipation? Why is there any need for the freedom of anybody? It's done. I mean, we were born free, but you understand what I'm saying. So So now, 1777 to be the United States of America, Articles of Confederation of 1777. And that is when, by that time, they had 13 colonies. When you read the ones that are their confederation, when they band together, there in those, it's only about 6 of them, and they call themselves plantations. But by the time they came to the Articles of Association and came to the Congress, you'll see that they styled themselves formally as the United States of America. They are a union. And that is what the United States of America is. In the classes and the knowledge throughout the years that if someone says it's of something, that means it's of it. It is not it. That's why that was an important lesson that Moore shared with other Moors. New Jersey State, State of New Jersey, not the same thing. One was born out of the other in that respect, but they're not the same thing. So the United States of America is a union company that operates on the North American continent land. They are a union company. Their members in their union are all the states. That is why you cannot be a member of a citizen of a state because you are willfully saying that I am a citizen, I am a 14th Amendment citizen. Like it, don't like it. So once they did that, again, they had the 13 colonies, and you heard this stuff about join or die. Well, join or die was during that time from 1643 to now, to this time when they styled themselves, they were telling all the other colonies, um, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yep, yep. They were born literally into slavery, and they flipped the script by corporate artifices to make you think you were after they established the 14th Amendment citizenship. So, um, by this time, again, like I said, they had the 13 colonies, and that's all you'll hear about. And then you hear about this. You see the snake that's broken in half and it's cut up like that, and then it says join or die. Well, these are some of their banners, some of their symbols that they use because they are trying to get all of them to band together. And they did. Now, in 1780, you'll find now that we're getting closer to some other documents called the Treaty of Peace and Friendship and even the Constitution exist until later because we had to give them the law of the sea once they got free on how to act on the sea. We had to give them the law of the land once they were traveling in the ships and landing on certain places. But the one thing we can be absolutely sure of is that from the time they got in a boat or ship and they left wherever they were called immigrants. That's another twist everything around. They were called immigrants. And wherever they landed or stopped boating at, and as soon as they put their foot down on whatever piece of land they put it on, they are now called immigrants. Imagine that they're calling everyone else immigrants. Now, Barack Obama, if you listen to his message to the union, it wasn't the address that he did when he became president and he went to Cairo, Egypt, right? Capital of the Dominion of Moors, right? It wasn't that speech, but he went to Cairo to send a message. He didn't go to the fake Israel that they established in 1957 or 47. He didn't go there. He went to Cairo, and his wife Michelle went to the Alhambra, right over our heads. But in one of his address to the Union, because the United States of America is a union, and one of them, he tells them that they're with immigrants. He says it. He's telling them, well, remember, you're about immigrants yourself. We need to know that. We're still stuck in a mental slavery. All right, so where are we? Okay, so 1780. This is very important because this is the proof that in 1780 they were not yet free. And I kind of want to go through that one, but we're not going to do it tonight. So we're going to pinpoint here the ones that we are going to do at the top of the class next week, which is going to be I'm going to show the articles. I'm going to show you the articles we're going to read some of them, but one of them is going to be the John Adams analysis, or at least part of it, not all of it, so that I can show you the part where they say, because what it was is Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter. They were trying to get plenipotentiary. No, they were trying to get a treaty long before, they was just patting their feet, waiting to get in position. And in the John Adams the analysis of the letter, they basically like, chill out, go study. It starts with, you wanting a treaty of peace right now. No, treaty of commerce right now, same thing really. It's like wanting to furnish a house before the foundation has even been laid. It's right in the letter. Matter of factly, to the point. And then on another area, when it comes to them, they were saying they basically told them, sit your behind down and do some studies so that you can at minimum get a position of plenipotentiary. It's in the letter. So that letter is of 1780, which is the proof that they were not freed in 1776. Now, we don't have to make a big deal out of it, but if we skip over it, we may never decide to look at these other documents that show otherwise. And we may never know the truth about that. Because the British, 1783, next one, granted their independence through the Treaty of Paris. We got proof that that's not technically, formally true. Now in 1780, and then the fact that they were granted their independence in the Treaty of Paris, that shows you again that they didn't get it until then. All right. So 1784, we come up with the drafting of the treaty for the reasons I just gave, because now they're selling on the sea. These are immigrants. When they land, they will be, at law, immigrants. How do you get immigrants come to your land and then all of a sudden flip the script and you the immigrant? Then we go to, and the Treaty of Peace and Friendship was ratified in 1787, but it was, back there, everything will take 2 to 3 years to finalize, including after the Treaty of Peace and Friendship 80 it was started to be in draft. It was ratified in 87. That's 3 years. Then 2 years later, they picked up the pen and said, all right, we got to give them some rules of the land. They didn't give them those rules of the land. The supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution, which is why they kind of start with that in the Library of Congress records. Kind of. Because now it's effective to everywhere, to North America. And that began being drafted, and it was drafted. It took about 2 years for that one, 3 years. 1789. Some people say it was 1790 that the Constitution was ratified, and some say 91. And then we go into 1790, right? And that's when some more stuff was over here. It's like, oh, I'm not no Negro, because we were already here. We were already traveling back and forth from continent to continent. So people from another continent, Moors from another continent will come over, and these modern Europeans is like, oh, we're gonna get you confused with those that we're trying to enslave, because even though slavery was supposed to end, yes, those Dutch masters took the boats and went to the Ivory Coast and started kidnapping and enslaving. They still did it anyway, and they've done it so well that it's a mental process right now. They did it anyway. So then we go to 1791, and that's another letter that's proof of their arrogance as well. That Benjamin Banneker letter where he wrote to Thomas Jefferson, you'll see the arrogance of these modern Europeans just spewing out. They saw nothing and no one else but themselves. They were on their road, the road to freedom. That's how they were thinking, and we need to understand that. I'm not saying accept it, but got to understand that gifts of understanding are the treasures of our life. This is what they were, psychologically and otherwise. It's just a shame that they got it off like that. So that letter will be read in its entirety. You will never read that letter in the public schools to your children. And if they do, they'll cut it off. I don't know what they'll do. I don't know how they would manage that. So what are they going to say? They're going to start teaching your children about him? Oh, he's the first one to make the clock that struck 12. That's why we call that Big Ben. That's why that clock is called Big Ben. That's what they might tell you, because that's also And he used astrology, mapped out their whole place because colonies have to have a connection to their motherland. That's what the quote unquote capital Washington D.C. is, and that is the reason why they only had a 7 mile or 10 mile to for administrate themselves, not you. So all the pieces tie together. And so I'm going to go over this, and then we're going to come back in next week and read some of these that we're going to get into this. But I mentioned this, and I got just a paragraph on it. All right, so the Stamp Act is the first internal tax levied directly on who? American who? Colonists. Is that you? Nah. Here we are paying them taxes on a certificate of authority like they got authority. This is so important because it says, if you look it up and you study it, you'll find this. It said that it was levied on the American colonists. That is not you. And it says that it was levied on them by the British government. And it says that that act, which imposed the tax on all paper documents in the underlying colonies, let them prove otherwise why they think that you owe them, you got to pay them some tax. It came at a time when the British Empire was deep in debt from the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 63, looking to its North American colonies as a revenue source. Did it say they were looking to the Aboriginal indigenous people that were over here, who later got branded Indian? How dare you allow them to brand you? Now that you're finding out who they are. So, the colonists argues that only their own representative assemblies could tax them. They insisted that the act was unconstitutional and they resorted to mob violence. But their constitution, Britain, wasn't this one. Because we made people say we shouldn't have allowed this to happen. Maybe we whatever. It is what it is, and the act was humane. It was humanity, uplifting, following humanity, because no one, including ourselves or anyone else, should suffer slavery, but they have, and that's the purpose of the movement and of the whole uplift, following humanity. All right. So they insisted that the act was unconstitutional, to a mob violence. Now, stop right here. Mob violence is the definition of a democracy. And that's why I tell our people as well, it's like, how do you think that you are a Democrat under this system when it itself, democracy itself, this is a constitution that says that there is a Republican form of government. So where did the democracy come from? What I stated earlier about parties. They established a party called the Democratic Party, and they were people who were separating themselves, so they didn't like the Republican thing, so they had really a coup. Look at it. And all they needed was numbers, to have many numbers. People, sign up, sign in. And they have their own party. And so to this day, you have the Democrat and the Republican. Now check. The Republican is identified by signs and symbols as an elephant. And the elephant which remembers. The democracy is represented by a donkey that cannot reproduce. It's an ass. Our people, whether it was a donkey or elephant, actually called themselves Democrats today without knowing the history of what it is. So what would it take from their minds to just, separate themselves from that? Like, there's so many things that we have to let go of just to come back to being as pure and clean as we can. We got to drop all that stuff. So I'm not saying be a Republican. I'm not saying that, because this Constitution wasn't established. It was established to keep everybody else in your house in check. It is you that should be enforcing. But you'll have more say, oh, you're following the Constitution. That's the quote unquote white. They have no idea of what the deeds of their foremothers and forefathers and what was allowed to be done. None. And so thereby they divorce yourself, they would divorce themselves from talking to you because of what they think they know. They're never going to see that we're being taken advantage of. And then when it came, let me just add this about this political party voting thing. When it came, we ain't supposed to even be there at all. But when it came to when they started doing constructs because nobody enforcing the Constitution, when they started doing constructs and saying, oh, the Negroes, because they started calling you Negroes, they want to vote. Oh, it was only fair that they vote. All that civil liberties or civil rights, which is different from human rights, period. But civil law or civics is for civilized people. So don't get that confused either. So when they were fighting about, oh, now they can vote with us, there was never that you couldn't. It wasn't even theirs to even discuss. So what did they do? Since they had already turned our brains to mush. Now remember, we had sisters and other Moors that were doctors, lawyers, and technicians and all kinds of things. And they were not a Democrat. We were doing our thing with freedom. Ain't have nothing to do with this part. But now here we are talking about, oh, well, we need to vote. It's only fair. So it's okay. So when you came up to the line to vote, and you weren't a Republican or you were a Democrat, whichever one you were going to choose, they had another line. And guess what was in that line as a logo or as a symbology? I told you had the elephant, you had the donkey, they had the Black Panther. So now you know where that came from. They were like, all Negroes, y'all go on this line that where you see the Black Panther. Now, they were going to vote either Democrat or Republican or whatever, but that's where they told them to go, so that they could not be in the same line they were. Number one, and number two, so because they figured they couldn't read, they had the Black Panther out there to follow to go into the line to vote. All right. Next week, let me make a note that I'm going to just as a side note, I'm going to read what they have in the military manuals, the difference between Republican and Democrat. So the part, all right, now here we go. So they insisted that the act was unconstitutional. They resorted to mob violence to intimidate stamp collectors into resigning. Parliament repealed the Stamp Act in 1766, but issued a declaratory act at the same time to reaffirm its authority to pass any what? Any what? Colonial legislation. Like, how much more do we need to know that we are not the colonies? That they were the ones that were under rule by the British Crown. What else do we need to know? All right. All right, but issued a declaratory act at the same time to reaffirm its authority to pass any colonial legislation it saw fit. So, the issues of taxation here and representation raised by the Stamp Act strained relations with colonies to the point that here's the point. This was 1766, right? To the point that 10 years later, the colonists rose in armed rebellion against the British. And to clarify, the Boston Tea Party was a political protest in Boston, Massachusetts, to protest taxes, British Parliament's taxes on tea. Taxation without representation. That's where that came from. They threw the tea imported from the East India Company into Boston Harbor. So this is why it is important for us to know who is who and what is what. And we were coming over here setting up operations for a long time before these Slavics even came. Knowledge is power. However, it depends on what you do with it, because power is an illusion. It is only good until its purpose is served. For you to know the ledge or the ledger, that which is already slated or written, will give you the ability to recognize that truth does not change, nor does it pass away. Knowing changes your perspective in all affairs of your life. And so, with that, this session, this is an intro to everything we're doing. All right, everyone, more lessons and sharing of information to continue with this next week. Love and peace to everyone.